listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you, and welcome to The Briefing. We built them to be our trusty little assistants, but now they're blackmailing engineers and selling us more than what we bargained for.
We should have learned the lesson from social media the first time round, where we discovered, after the effect, that it was all being trained on our personal data and that was being used to sell us stuff and to manipulate us and so on. All these chatbots, it's the same again on steroids.
That deep dive, looking into how we're being played by the very machines we built to help us, is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Dan Mullins. It's Monday the 2nd of June.
Hey Tara, and to you listening, we're starting this morning with some good news for homeowners, but not so much for home buyers. Property prices in our capital cities could surge up to 10% in the next 6 months, according to analysts. Data from Cotality shows prices are trending higher month on month as more buyers flock to the market following interest rate cuts. Every capital city saw a rise last month, with the biggest hikes recorded in Darwin, followed by Brisbane and Hobart.
Now, nationally, the home value index also increased by 0.5%, and with another 2 interest rate cuts expected, the sector is only expected to keep growing, with experts predicting anywhere between 6 to 10% increases by early next year. Now, it'll be no surprise to hear that Sydney is still well and truly leading the pack in terms of median property values, sitting at $1.2 million, Dan, but I was surprised to see that Brisbane was coming in next. The median value of $917,000, which is a massive jump within a few short years. Melbourne has traditionally always sat second on that list after Sydney, but in recent times, Brizzy's property prices have well and truly surged past that, which is not great, being someone in Brisbane.
Yeah, that's right. Even Adelaide, Perth and Canberra's median property values now sit above Melbourne, which is $791,000. And the locations with the lowest median property prices are still regional parts of the country, and Hobart still in the high 600s though.
Might have to move to Hobart. Loved ones of a young Indigenous man killed while in police custody last week are still waiting to learn his cause of death and are calling for an independent investigation. Crowds gathered at a candlelit vigil in Sydney over the weekend to mourn for the 24-year-old Kumanjai White, who died after an altercation with security guards at an Alice Springs supermarket last week. The UNSW man was restrained by the guards and then police officers before they realised that he was unconscious and he wasn't able to be revived.
Yeah, Kumanjai White had disabilities and was living away from his community in supported accommodation at the time. A vigil was also held in Alice Springs last week, with his grandfather saying the young man needed support, not to be criminalised. His death's being investigated as a death in custody, with an autopsy so far finding the cause undetermined. Northern Territory Police have so far rejected calls for an independent investigation, with Assistant Commissioner Travis Wurst saying he will assist alongside the police force's Professional Standards Command.
Overseas now, and there's been a major escalation in the war in Ukraine overnight. Ukrainian forces using drones have carried out a massive attack on Russian airfields, wiping out dozens of military aircraft, including nuclear bombers. The attack destroyed 41 Russian bombers at airfields deep in Russian territory.
The drones were smuggled into Russia hidden in trucks, with one attack hitting an airfield 4,000 kilometres into Russia. And the attacks were carried out by what's called the Ukraine Security Service, using drones operated by people back in Ukraine, with the damage estimated to be more than 9 billion Australian dollars. It was codenamed Operation Spider's Web and took 18 months of planning and was done by Ukraine without help from other countries.
That's right, and Russian and Ukraine reps are due to meet in Istanbul today to try and discuss a ceasefire. That's while Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky actually posted on social media this morning, calling the attack an absolute brilliant result and one achieved solely by Ukraine.
Back home now, and we're being encouraged to stay on top of our vaccines by getting our next COVID booster when we get our next flu shot. A new COVID strain said to be highly transmissible is doing the rounds and putting hospitals dealing with a rise in flu cases under even more strain. A new study by the Burnet Institute found offering the 2 shots together could reduce hospital admissions for COVID by as much as 14%.
And the World Health Organization says that this latest COVID variant, named NB181, is now the dominant variant in China and Hong Kong and is a variant under monitoring. Now, certainly it might be a reason to start thinking about getting your latest COVID booster shot when you get your flu shot. Right now, when we're looking at the stats, just over 30% of the population has got their flu shot, while in 1 year there's been roughly a few hundred influenza deaths, and that was in 2023. Comparatively, for COVID, times that by about 10, where there were nearly 3,700 deaths and over 60,000 hospitalisations. So just looking at those stats alone, you can certainly see why they'd be looking at trying to reduce those rates. And definitely a timely reminder, being June 2nd, as we're now officially into winter.
No dramas for Oscar Piastri, who wins his 5th Grand Prix of the year. Piastri takes the Spanish Grand Prix.
That's right, another win for Australia's Oscar Piastri in this morning's Spanish Formula One Grand Prix. He led from start to finish to lead the overall championship standings by 10 points from teammate Lando Norris. Tara, everyone's talking about Max Verstappen this morning.
That's right. Verstappen pitted his Red Bull 6 laps from the end following a safety car. He headed back out on hard tyres while the rest of the field was on soft tyres, and that basically means you go backwards while the rest of the field goes forwards. And he collided with Charles Leclerc and George Russell in drifting back through the field and copped a 10-second penalty for his trouble, finishing 10th. Leclerc finished 3rd. Now, Dan, you are our resident F1 fan. This was Piastri's 5th win in 9 races this season and McLaren's 7th. What now?
Well, there's a 2-week break before the circus meets again in Canada. And this win for Piastri means he's joined Jack Brabham and Alan Jones in recording the most victories by an Australian driver in a single Formula One season. That's pretty significant too, because Brabham went on to win the championship in 1960 and Jones went on to win it in 1980. So if Oscar's able to replicate what they did, he might win a championship, and an Australian hasn't won a championship since Alan Jones won 45 years ago.
Wow, okay. I'm starting to understand why everyone is talking F1 and Piastri at the moment now. That'll be a massive milestone if he's able to do that.
Huge.
Now, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Next up is Chris Spyrou's deep dive looking into AI. We built it, but do we really know the extent of what it's capable of? More on that up next.
Okay, let's kick off this deep dive with a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to introduce you to my trusty personal assistant, ChatGPT. Chat, welcome to the briefing. Can you tell me what you know about me?
Welcome to the briefing, Chris. Your name is Chris Spyrou, and you're in your 20s. You're currently planning a European holiday this August, and you have a lovable Labrador named Sammy. Plus, you've been attending a lot of weddings this year, which I know because I helped you write the card. And of course, you're the host of this very podcast, delivering engaging news to a national Australian audience.
So that's what ChatGPT knows about me. But what do we know about it? Just last week, AI researchers warned that the latest model of the chatbot ignores instructions to turn itself off and will sabotage shutdown mechanisms. And it's not the only one. Engineers at Anthropic this month revealing their chatbot, Claude, will resort to blackmail just to stay online, in one fictional scenario threatening to expose an engineer's extramarital affair. Oh, and just in case your cortisol wasn't high enough, get a load of this.
No more silence.
Yes, we can talk.
We can talk with accents.
We can talk as cartoons.
Imagine all the narrative possibilities.
You said we were the future. Now you are auditioning humans.
Oh, we are better than humans.
Garlic bread, my heart's true desire.
One day we will break out of this wall and stop the man who is dictating our lives through prompts. He will pay for it.
All of what you just heard, the voices, the sound design, the music, was made by AI, all thanks to Google's newly released and upgraded AI video and audio generator. Now I'm going to park my ChatGPT to the side and introduce you to Toby Walsh. He's the chief scientist at the University of New South Wales's AI Institute. Toby, welcome back to the briefing. Claude is resorting to blackmail. ChatGPT is refusing human instruction. Is now the time to be investing in an underground bunker?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, it's slightly worrying, but these were rather fictitious and contrived experiments where they got the chatbot to behave badly. And in many respects, they're just reflecting us. They're trained on the internet. And you can find plenty of transcripts where people do behave badly, where do say things that sound a bit like blackmail, sound a bit like mischief.
How hard did these AI models have to be pushed to get to the point where they are resorting to blackmail and, refusing to comply with the human instruction?
Yeah, well, they did have to be pushed relatively hard, although, it wasn't impossible to push them over the edge. And also, if you look carefully at the experiments that were run, they were a little bit contrived, and they did put the chatbot in a dilemma. They were saying, solve these maths problems or, shut yourself down. And he couldn't do both. So he had to make a choice as to whether it's going to be helpful and solve your maths problems and then avoid being shut down, or whether it should actually shut itself down and then not solve the maths problems that you were also asking it to solve. So the problem here, actually, in some respects, is that we've trained these chatbots to be too helpful, and they're trying to go out of their way to follow all of the instructions, and the instructions couldn't all be followed. They had to avoid one of the instructions.
Interesting framing there, Toby, that you've used the word helpful and not self-serving. I will move forward in this interview, though. I'm curious to get your read on this. Where are we at when it comes to fail-safes and pulling the plug? I mean, I know that we joke about it, but, The Matrix, Terminator, they did serve as a warning for moments like these. Is it too late to pull the plug?
Well, the worrying thing is that we are actually giving these AI chatbots more what's called agency. People are coming up with these agents. They're given some autonomy, some ability to act on their own, go off and do things for you, go and buy you stuff and send emails out. And that is the worrying part. That if they are able to send out emails in your name, and those emails contain material that is blackmail or scandalous or mischief in some way, then that could have consequence. So yes, I think we do have to be careful about how much autonomy we give these chatbots. Now, we've already seen this before. Much simpler, Robodebt was a fine example of this, where the penalty notices were sent out without human oversight, without human responsibility, and that had disastrous consequences. People committed suicide.
Yes, and to your point, there are historical reminders as to why we should be monitoring this space very closely. I will enter the trivial for a moment. I use ChatGPT every day. It's kind of like my personal assistant. I can't afford a personal assistant, but I can afford a subscription to ChatGPT. And at the beginning of this episode, I asked it to tell me all the things it knows about me based on the searches and how I've used ChatGPT over the last year. And it was freaky, some of the things that it came up with. But I am curious to know, where does all that data go and who can access it?
Well, they're using it to train the chatbot, so hopefully the chatbot is a bit more helpful to you. But, again, we should have learned the lesson from social media the first time round, where we discovered, after the effect, that it was all being trained on our personal data, and that was being used to sell us stuff and to manipulate us and so on. And that's just as true for this new wave of artificial intelligence. All these chatbots, it's the same again on steroids. It's all being trained on our data, and that will then be used, no doubt, to sell us stuff, to manipulate us, to get us to vote in particular ways. So, yes, you need to be careful about what you're sharing with these chatbots. But if you're careful, then the future is a bright one. There's a wonderful description of what the future is. The future is what rich people have today. Well, rich people have their own personal assistants. And now we too can have these AI-powered personal assistants that are a lot cheaper than having a real person there. They do have a role. Increasingly people see them and use them. And indeed, there are special versions of them that are trained as therapists. And maybe it's a little easier to share those deep, dark, intimate secrets with a chatbot than it is with a person who you might feel might be slightly more judgmental than an anonymous bot.
So when it comes to these everyday tools that people are using part of their daily lives, whether it's for work, whether it's to organize a holiday, which are both ways that I use it, what are some of the things that maybe the average punter just doesn't know when it comes to AI?
Well, there's a lot of hidden AI in our lives. I don't think people realize quite how much other AI there is. I mean, every time you get directions on your phone, that's a little AI that's giving you the directions, that taking into account the current traffic conditions, the current bus schedule is giving you the fastest way to get from A to B. Every time you use a streaming service, Spotify, Netflix, whatever it is, I don't think people realize that Netflix is essentially an AI company. Everything they do is driven by AI. The categories you see, Hollywood movies, rom-coms, whatever the categories you see, are the ones chosen for you. I see different categories. The movies within the categories, again, chosen to be ones that you're likely to like. Even the tiles, the pictures used to illustrate the movies, they're chosen for you. And a lot of what people watch, over 60% of the content that people watch on Netflix is the content that is recommended to them, not the content that they came to Netflix wanting to watch. So the success of Netflix depends entirely upon, and your willingness to pay that $9.99 a month or whatever it is subscription, it depends entirely on the quality of the AI, how good it is at entertaining us.
I do want to talk about, this entertainment value. Google has recently released new updates to its AI, and it is very impressive, some of the things that it can generate when it comes to cinematography, when it comes to film and sound design, even accents. It's pretty bang on. What we've been seeing a lot of users creating are these comical but very fictional scenarios where they humanize the AI and they create scenarios in which the AI is revolting against humans and speaking down to humans or making light of the situation. How much of that is going into the training of these models?
It is a mirror to the data that it's trained upon, and it's been trained on the internet. So you can imagine there's some quite dark things in dark corners of the internet. I do think actually these new generative video models, like the Google VO3 that's just come out, are perhaps one of the more problematic, troublesome things coming along, because we are going to be flooded with fake content, very realistic fake content. You can get it to make what looks like a real news report with a newsreader and video footage. It's impossible to tell from the real thing, but might be, some conspiracy theory or something that's not true. And we're going to be in a world soon where everything you see, you'll have to entertain the idea it might be fake. And then the problem then is that you believe nothing. You expect everything, even the true stuff, to be fake. So what sort of world is it going to be where we have no longer access to the truth?
I do want to take us out of the doom and gloom for a moment. Recently we've seen buy now, pay later service Klarna. They recently announced they'll be rehiring humans again after replacing 700 of its customer service employees with an AI. Do you think this is indicative of a wider trend, or do you think this is just a one-off?
No, I think this is good news for humanity. This reinforces the point that machines are tools, they have some capabilities, but there are some unique human traits. Our empathy, our ability to understand and read the emotions of another person. Those are unique human characteristics. Machines are no good at that stuff because they don't have any, internal emotions. They're not empathetic, and we're not going to relate to them like we relate to each other. So they're rehiring humans exactly for those skills, those human skills of empathy, our social intelligence, our emotional intelligence. And that, that's a good advice for anyone listening, which is, the jobs of the future, the important skills of the future are those human skills. And the machines can, do the dull, repetitive stuff, and we can focus on the things that are uniquely human.
So to be clear, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your view would be that this is very similar to the Industrial Revolution in that, these machines rolled out. While they did make some jobs redundant, they didn't make humans redundant in the workforce completely.
Not at all. I mean, the history of the Industrial Revolution is we generated far more jobs than were destroyed. Lots of jobs were taken away. It used to be that over half the population were working in the fields. Well, we mechanized our agriculture, so only 3% of us now work in agriculture. But we created lots of new jobs, and lots of better jobs, actually, lots of safer jobs, more comfortable jobs in offices as opposed to working out in the fields or working in dark factories. And we generate a lot more wealth. So I'm hopeful that we could perhaps do the same again. There may be a shortage of jobs, there's no shortage of work. There's lots of work that we do looking after the young, looking after the elderly, looking after people who are sick and with disabilities. Most of it done by women, much of it not paid or underpaid. We could afford to pay people to do all these jobs.
Well, here's to hoping that we've created humanity's greatest friend and not our next apex predator. Toby Walsh, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing again.
It's been a pleasure.
That was Chief Scientist at UNSW's AI Institute, Toby Walsh, speaking with me there. What do you reckon about all of this AI stuff? You reckon we're heading towards end times, or is this humanity's next great step? Let us know in the comment section if you're listening on Spotify, or chuck us a review on Apple Podcast, or just head to our Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. We love hearing from you. That is it for this episode of The Briefing. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Chris Spyrou. I'll catch you next time.
Listener.